Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, the ruling party's candidate Mohammad Sadiq Sinjarani has been re-elected as the chairman of the upper house of the parliament. He bagged 48 votes against opposition candidate Yusuf Raza Gilani, who secured 48 votes. The slot for the deputy chairman was also won by the government-backed candidate Mirza Mohammad Afridi. He received 54 votes out of 98. Turkey says it is planning to host a round of Afghanistan peace talks in Istanbul next month. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Ankara would appoint a special envoy for Afghanistan. Çavuşoğlu's comments come after Washington proposed Ankara to host a meeting. Earlier, Russia also announced to hold a conference on Afghanistan in Moscow later this month. In Myanmar, the pro-democracy activists are holding more rallies against the military coup a day after 12 protesters were killed by the security forces. At least 70 people have died in clashes with the security forces since the February the 1st coup. Meanwhile, South Korea says it will suspend defense and security exchanges with Myanmar over the ongoing unrest. The WHO says that there is no indication that AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine is linked to blood clots and that the countries should not stop using it. The advice comes after Bulgaria joined several other countries in suspending the use of the jab. Globally, the virus has infected more than 118 million people, has claimed over 2.6 million lives, including 13,430 in Pakistan. And in sports, the Pakistan Cricket Board has announced the squad for the upcoming tours of South Africa and Zimbabwe. Players will depart for Johannesburg on the 26th of March for the 3 ODIs and 4 T20 internationals against South Africa. They will then fly to Bulawayo on the 17th of April for 3 T20 internationals and 2 tests against Zimbabwe. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. In Pakistan, the ruling party Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has won the 2 coveted slots in the upper house of the parliament. Mohammad Sadiq Sinjarani was elected chairman, while Mirza Mohammad Afridi was elected his deputy. Sinjarani secured 48 votes against joint opposition candidate Yusuf Raza Gilani, who bagged 42 votes. 7 votes cast in favor of Gilani were rejected because stamps were not placed on the ballot papers correctly. Afridi beat opposition candidate Abdul Ghafoor Hadri by a margin of 10 votes. He received 54 votes. In total, 98 lawmakers voted in the election after 44 newly elected senators took oath earlier in the day. A Swedish institute says India is no longer an electoral democracy and classified the country as an electoral autocracy. The relegation was given to India's government's subjugation of media and overuse of defamation and sedition laws. In its annual report, VDEM Institute noted a significant decline in the democratic freedoms under Narendra Modi's government. It said over 7,000 people have been charged with sedition after Modi assumed power in 2014. The report said the Hindu nationalist government has used counter-terrorism and defamation laws to silence critics. Pakistan says India's inhuman military siege in occupied Jammu and Kashmir has caused a $3 billion loss to civilians. Pakistan's envoy Munir Akram says the coercive actions of Indian troops in the disputed territory violate UN resolutions. In a statement at the UN Security Council, Akram said there has been a communications blackout in the valley for nearly 600 days. He said shoot-at-sight curfews and the severing of all transport links prevent Kashmiri farmers from reaching their lands. Akram added this has caused acute food shortages in the occupied valley. He urged India to uphold the country's council's resolution, which guarantees people living under the foreign occupation control over economic activities. In Nigeria, 180 students have been rescued after gunmen stormed a college in the Kaduna state and kidnapped over 200 people. Officials say 30 students are still missing. They say female students were also among those kidnapped. This abduction is the latest in a string of similar kidnapping cases within the last few weeks. Nearly 300 schoolgirls were freed after being abducted from their school in Zamfara. At least 42 people were abducted from a state-run school last month in Niger and later released. Over 300 schoolboys were taken and later freed in December. Turkey says it is planning to host a round of Afghanistan peace talks in Istanbul in April. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Ankara would appoint a special envoy for Afghanistan. Çavuşoğlu said Turkey had previously been asked by the Afghan officials, the Taliban and the negotiation team to host talks. He said this is not an alternative to the Doha peace process and Turkey will carry this out in coordination with Qatar. Çavuşoğlu's comments come after the US shared a draft peace plan with the Afghan officials, Taliban leaders and others. Earlier, Russia also announced to hold a conference on Afghanistan in Moscow later this month. Moscow has invited the US, China, Pakistan, the Afghan government and the Taliban for the meeting. In Myanmar, the pro-democracy activists are holding more rallies across the country against the military coup. It comes a day after a rights group said security forces killed 12 demonstrators in different cities. The UN human rights investigators said the military has killed at least 70 people and detained 2,000 since the February 1st coup. Meanwhile, Aung San Suu Kyi's lawyer has dismissed junta's allegations of receiving over $600,000 and gold as bribery. In a statement, her lawyer termed the accusations the most hilarious joke. In another development, South Korea said it will suspend defense and security exchanges with Myanmar over the unrest. Moreover, the British government has urged its citizens to leave Myanmar unless there is an urgent need to stay. US President Joe Biden says a free and open Indo-Pacific is essential for all in the region. He said this in a virtual meeting with the leaders of Australia, India and Japan. He said the US is committed to working with its partners and allies for regional security. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga urged the Quad to make a contribution to peace. Washington aims to bolster ties with the key allies in the Indo-Pacific region to counter an assertive China in Asia and beyond. Earlier, the Chinese Foreign Ministry told the US not to interfere in its internal affairs. The US says some hopeful progress has been made towards achieving a ceasefire in Yemen. In a statement, the US State Department said more commitment is still needed from the warring parties in Yemen. It said US Special Envoy Tim Lenderking has visited Saudi Arabia and Oman in a UN-coordinated effort to push for a truce in Yemen. It added Lenderking and UN Special Envoy are committed to working to push the parties to negotiate under the UN-proposed plan. The State Department said Houthis must end their offensive on Marib and the cross-border attacks against Saudi Arabia. Riyadh says it seeks a negotiated resolution to the Yemen conflict, but Houthis have intensified missile and drone strikes on civilian targets. The US says it is reviewing the measures to advance the process of a political settlement in Syria in consultation with the UN and allies. In a press briefing, State Department's spokesperson Ned Price said the U.S. continues to promote a political settlement to end the conflict. However, Price said the Syrian government must change its behavior for a sustainable end to the conflict. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has done nothing to restore his legitimacy. Price also ruled out normalizing ties with Damascus anytime soon. Price's remarks have come just a day after Russia, Turkey and Qatar held talks in Doha to promote a political solution to the Syrian conflict. The U.S. says it has discussed concerns about Iran with Israel during the first virtual meeting of a bilateral strategic group. White House spokesperson says National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and his Israeli counterpart Meir Ben-Shabbat headed the delegations. Spokesperson Emily Horn said the two sides shared perspectives on regional security issues of mutual interest and concern. In a statement, she said the leaders expressed their common determination to confront the challenges and threats facing the region. Horn said the national security advisors agreed on the importance of strategic interagency consultations. She added Sullivan pledged to continue to these engagements. Russia has announced a unilateral ban on the deployment of intermediate-range nuclear forces where there are no U.S. systems of its type. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry's spokesperson warned the U.S. against deploying INF missiles around the world. Maria Zakharova said the deployment of such systems can have an extremely destabilizing effect on international security. The spokesperson said the move can also provoke a new round of the global arms race. She said Russia remains open to working with the U.S. to strengthen international security and strategic stability. Sudan says Saudi Arabia has promised a $1.5 billion grant as part of the economic aid which was announced in 2019. According to the state media, Riyadh and Abu Dhabi pledged to provide $3 billion to Sudan in April 2019. It said a batch of aid valued at $750 million was deposited into the Sudanese government account. The aid will contribute to help solve the wheat, medicine and oil shortage crisis. Sudan faces scarcity of foreign currency and shortages of some basic commodities from time to time. Turkey and Egypt have resumed diplomatic-level contacts after years of hiatus triggered by Abdul Fattah al-Sisi's 2013 military coup. In an interview, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said neither side has put forward preconditions for the talks. He said the contacts have been resumed at the intelligence and foreign ministry level. Çavuşoğlu also expressed willingness to mend ties with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. At the United Nations, Western nations have slammed Egypt for using anti-terrorism laws to muzzle critics of the government. In a joint statement, 31 countries, including the U.S., called on Egypt to end prosecution of activists and political opponents. They also urged Cairo to unconditionally release the detained activists. This comes after an Egyptian rights group alleged that its staff members were detained and slapped with terror charges last year. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Brazil, COVID-19 has claimed more than 2,200 lives for the second day in a row, raising the death toll to over 272,000. Meanwhile, Thailand has become the latest country to suspend the use of AstraZeneca vaccine against the coronavirus. The global number of deaths has exceeded 2.6 million, with more than 118 million infections. More in this report.
COVID-19 vaccine rollout has exposed in the most blatant ways the stark divide between the developed and the developing world. An investigation shows that Pfizer employed high-level bullying against at least 2 Latin American nations during talks to acquire vaccines. This comes as the fresh outbreak spirals out of control in Brazil, forcing its most populous state, Sao Paulo, to declare a 2-week emergency shutdown. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has signed a $1.9 trillion economic relief bill into law. Biden says his goal of administering 100 million vaccines in the first 100 days will be achieved on just the 60th day of his presidency.
This country will be vaccinated soon. Our economy will be on the mend. Our kids will be back in school. And we'll have proven once again that this country can do anything, hard things, big things, important things.
In Europe, Portugal has extended a state of emergency until the end of March as the government geared up to unveil a long-awaited plan to gradually lift the strict lockdown. Amid the lagging rollout, EU expanded its list of approved vaccines to 4 options with the addition of Johnson & Johnson's single-shot vaccine. European Union's medicines regulator says there is no indication that the vaccine is linked to an increased risk of blood clots. Canada, Australia, France and Germany have also spoken in favor of the AstraZeneca after 10 countries banned it over safety issues.
It's
important to note that the batches we're all talking about in Italy or Austria are different ones. It's always also about different batches, gestures, which were produced. So as of now, we are planning to continue vaccinating with AstraZeneca, just like an overall majority of other European countries. I was already in contact today with several European counterparts, and we said we would continue to monitor the situation very closely.
South Korea says it will extend social distancing rules with a ban on private gatherings of more than 4 people in a bid to stamp out the possibility of a 4th wave of infections. Meanwhile, New Zealand's largest city, Auckland, has lifted all remaining restrictions after no locally transmitted cases were reported for 2 weeks.
Pakistan has registered its highest single-day COVID-19 cases in months with over 2,700 infections. The health ministry says the virus claimed 54 lives overnight, pushing the death toll to 13,430. The ministry said the infection tally has crossed the 600,000 mark, out of which 568,000 have recovered. It said the number of active cases in the country is nearly 19,000. The ministry added over 1,700 patients are in critical condition. 6 miners have died in a blast at a coal mine in Pakistan's southwestern province of Balochistan. Officials said 8 miners got trapped 1,000 feet underground when accumulating methane gas exploded at the coal field in Marwar. An official said the rescue team retrieved the dead bodies. Authorities said the mine has been closed and an inquiry into the incident has been ordered. According to an official, 102 coal miners have been killed in Balochistan in 72 different incidents in the past year. The US's President Joe Biden is deeply concerned and highly engaged on the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia. White House spokesperson says the U.S. has repeatedly demanded an international probe into the reports of human rights abuses in Tigray. Spokesperson Jen Psaki said the President has engaged Addis Ababa on the importance of ending violence. In a press conference, she said Washington has reiterated that current situation in Ethiopia is unacceptable. This has come a day after the Secretary of State condemned ethnic cleansing in Tigray and called for the withdrawal of the foreign forces. Human rights agencies claim that the army and the rebels committed several war crimes in Tigray region during a brief conflict in 2020. South Africa's Zulu king Goodwill Zwelithini has passed away at the age of 72. He had been hospitalized last month for a diabetes treatment. Zwelithini was the leader of the country's largest ethnic group, consisting of over 10 million people. He ascended the throne in 1971 during the apartheid era at the age of 23, 3 years after the death of his father. Throughout his more than 50-year reign, he was a strong advocate for preserving cultural identity. At least 11 people have died in an accident on a highway in the northern Mexican state of Nuevo Leon. The state government says 7 others were injured in the collision between a diesel tanker truck and a passenger bus. The Nuevo Leon Civil Protection Directorate said the tanker caught fire when the bus overturned after the crash. In a statement, the agency said the driver of the tanker was not found at the scene. It said an investigation is underway to locate the driver. More than a dozen people are missing in a series of wildfires in Argentina. Country's national news agency says authorities believe the blazes were set intentionally, most likely in connection with the local conflict. The fires were burning in several spots in the Patagonia region, known as the 42nd parallel. Interior Minister Vado Di Pedro says the outbreaks were started simultaneously in different locations. In Chubut province, around 250 homes are believed to have been damaged, many of them completely destroyed. State Governor Mariano Oricioni asked the National Security Ministry for help in controlling the fire. Authorities say 7 people were injured, at least one of them seriously. China has launched its new generation Long March 7A Y2 carrier rocket in South China's Henan province. The rocket will send an experimental satellite into the planned orbit. The satellite will be used for in-orbit tests of new technologies, including space environment monitoring. The Xizang Satellite Launch Center termed the mission as an absolute success. The rocket will be the first type of high-orbit carrier rocket which will carry out multiple subsequent missions. This is the 362nd flight mission of the Long March rocket series. In Benin, a French artist, Guillaume Lagros, has painted 2 giant interlaced hands on the ground of a local beach. The painting is part of his Beyond Walls project that features the longest human chain in the world. More in this report.
As waves were hitting the shore of Benin Beach, residents of Ouda village gathered around and observed the artist in wonder. Their curiosity came to a positive end after strokes of paint formed into 2 giant interlaced hands on the ground. Legros, who is famously known as Sepe, says the intertwined hands are a symbol of kindness and goodwill. The renowned street artist is known for his monumental frescoes made with biodegradable paint on lawns and beaches across the globe. He arrived at Ouda to finish the 10th step of Beyond Walls project, which started in 2019 and Champs-Élysées in Paris. Even though his paintings of hands look very similar in 10 locations, each of them has elements from local culture and history. Creating a human chain of hands around the globe represents unity, mutual aid, and common effort beyond geographical constraints. After almost 2 years, Sepe has visited 3 continents and painted 37 pairs of hands.
Rising lava in Mount NYIRAGONGO and empty coffers have left volcano watchers worried in eastern Congo. The Goma Volcano Observatory says the readings are crucial to early warnings of eruption, but without funds, they are struggling to make even basic checks. More in this report.
The world's largest continually active lava lake spits and froths, lighting up the dusky sky and coughing up a slow series of staccato blasts. In the nearby city of Goma, 250 people had died and 120,000 were made homeless in 2002's lava eruption. Watchers worry that volcanic activity observed in the last 5 years mirrors that in the years preceding the 1977 and 2002 eruptions. Analyst Honori Siraba says the volcano's crater has once again filled with magma. He fears a bigger disaster if an earthquake were to cause a fracture in the flank of the volcano.
If we don't do it regularly, we won't know where the crater is expanding. The more magma that goes up into the crater, the more the crater expands. We need to know exactly where that is. Since even if the crater, as you can see, is already 1.03 kilometers, it is possible that it is expanding on the other side. We have to know by how much it's expanding.
Siraba says they have to continuously check the volcano's reading to predict a possible eruption. But ever since the World Bank declined to renew a $2 million funding program amid embezzlement allegations, Siraba and his colleagues at the Goma Volcano Observatory have been unable to pay for an internet connection to run remote sensors and fuel to transport researchers to the volcano.
We are very curious to see whether the NYIRAGONGO, that erupted in 2002 will erupt again. We have to observe it so that we have enough data and can also train those who will come after us. We can show the world that Congolese scientists are also capable of doing what others do.
Now, they have to manually download data on memory cards during the handful of occasions they visit the volcano every year. The World Bank said the observatory lacked experience and there was weakness in implementing such a grant. Goma was partially buried 19 years ago, but now has expanded towards the volcano. Its population is estimated to have tripled, around 1.5 million, and could make an eruption deadlier.
The Greek capital of Athens has presented a unique solution to pollution and heat caused by overcrowding. Authorities have constructed bite-sized parks, transforming small unused city plots ridden with garbage and weeds. This report has more.
Tucked between rows of towering apartment blocks on an Athens street, a small strip of green disrupts the surrounding concrete jungle. A few trees, plants, and a park bench fitted into as little as 100 square meters offers a bit of breathing space. Locals say such places create new reference points inside the city where people can congregate.
It's about creating green spaces, lowering the temperatures, giving quality of life, and creating new reference points inside the city for people to come together.
Cradled within mountains, the Athens basin can be stifling during heat waves, when no northern trade winds are blowing, trapping heat and pollutants within. In a bid to limit vehicles, the city is closing lanes on main arteries and opening bike lanes and pedestrian walks with greenery. Featuring various species of trees and plants, pocket parks can also hinder residents from using their cars to travel to a regular park.
It is very nice to allow us to breathe a little, because the way we are living here, especially in this city, we are suffocating. So it's good and will be a good initiative to allow us to breathe a bit.
Experts say such projects are needed since the impacts of climate change are expected to exacerbate the problem. The benefits of these urban spaces have been seen in cities such as New York and London.
In Mexico City, famous wrestlers turned Latin America's largest market into a battleground against COVID-19 as they barged down walkways to urge people to wear masks for protection against the virus. More in this report.
These masked wrestlers wandering Mexico City's Central de Abastos market are not doing so to pick a fight, but to make people wear masks and contain the coronavirus. The activity is the part of a campaign by the Mexico City's Institute of Youth, which has been deploying wrestlers around the city to promote face masks.
It's really good because they are helping to prevent more infections. Today, I forgot my face mask. I do have one, but I forgot to bring it. But now I'm wearing one. The initiative is very good.
Under normal circumstances, the Central de Abastos market, expanded on 300 hectares, attracts 500,000 visitors daily. Despite the fact that the nation ranks 4th in the world in deaths from the disease, many Mexicans still refuse to wear face masks.
It is still difficult because there are people who are reluctant to wear a face mask and believe in the virus. But we continue to fight every day. This does not end, and that is why we are here raising awareness in different parts of the Mexico City so that people continue to wear their face masks, so that they continue to gather with us in this fight.
The wrestling arenas that were normally filled with thousands of fans remain closed a year after the coronavirus arrived in Mexico.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another business update. Britain's economy has declined in January on renewed coronavirus curbs, while the country's post-Brexit EU exports also suffered a record collapse. Official data has shown that exports to the EU dropped over 40% in January. The Office for National Statistics said Britain's gross domestic product shrank nearly 3% in January. The figures show the economy is 9% smaller than it was before the COVID-19 pandemic. The UK's departure from the EU was finalised on the 1st of January after the government sealed a long-awaited Brexit trade deal. Wall Street stocks have opened lower after closing at record highs in the previous session. Spike in the US bond yields reignited inflation worries and dented appetite for high-growth stocks. Sharp rise in the interest rates put pressure on the high-growth tech stocks. This dropped the shares of Tesla to over 3%, whereas Netflix and Facebook shed 2%. The indices of S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite traded down, except the DJI, which was up fractionally. Meanwhile, the oil prices remained steady on production cuts and demand recovery optimism. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.